This is a new vertical fin. The old one off the other airplane is probably okay. It needs to be cleaned up, but I bought all new flying surfaces for the tail, vertical fin, rudder, horizontal stabilizers, and elevators when I got the fuselage. They come primed, powder coat prime. But I don't know whether this stuff is MEK proof or not. I just had a label on here that I just tried to soak off with a little bit of lacquer thinner, and the lacquer thinner softened it up pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and coat it with Polyfiber's Stitz's primer. I know that it's good for the fabric. It's MEK proof once it dries. In fact, just about got to throw your spray painting stuff away when you're done with it, so just use those cheap Harbor Freight spray guns. You can't clean them up anyway. The lacquer thinner melts all the guts out of those. So I got the fin painted with the Stitz with Polyfiber primer, and it went pretty good. Should hold up a lot better. It's supposed to hold up well. You can't cut it with MEK once it's on there, so that'll be better for putting the fabric on. I painted it down in the shop, and then I brought it up here to hang it up here overnight because the bugs were attracting to it, but it was pretty much cured. It's not fully cured, of course, but it's pretty much tack free within a few minutes, so it was not probably going to get any more bugs stuck in it, but it got a couple in it while I was painting it. So I take some 400 grit sandpaper and kind of knock down some of the lumps in it where the bugs made. And while I had some of the primer mixed up, I brought it up here and I just used a paintbrush, just a little model brush, and kind of touched up this area here that was scarred up from the screw up that I made on it. The main thing is to get it covered so it's protected from the moisture and rust and stuff. That's probably the worst spot back here. That gets the most of the abuse because it's the tail. It's right down in the salt water and gets the most of it. So I have to figure out something to do with this pad here for the landing gear, the attach point. I don't need that. I probably should have told them not to put that on there when they built the airplane, but that's always a sore spot there. It's a flat spot, collects water in there. I've already boogered up the powder coat on it from the bolts that was holding the stand on there. So the paint on the vertical fin dried overnight and it set up real nice. There's a few little high spots on it where the bugs and stuff got on it. I knocked those down with a little bit of 400 grit sandpaper, and it's pretty smooth. There's nothing that's going to show through the fabric. So I've got it sitting, mounting it in the fuselage here now. Now it goes in two places. One is back here on the tail post. It slides down into the rudder post or the tail post, and then there's a socket for it right there. It's just kind of a U-shaped bent piece of metal that's attached to the bushing that the jack screw goes through, just to the rear of that. Now I set this in there without it in that bushing behind the jack screw so that I could get it to slide down in this tail post easy. It gets in a bind if you try to do both of them at the same time, and it slides down there kind of hard. So I wanted to get it lined up how deep it would go back there in that tail post, and I've got it slid down in there now. Got the rudder mounted to it, and the bushings at the top on the tail post and the rudder line up pretty good. I've got a pin just stuck in there a little bit, just enough to hold it, and that holds it up, and then that can give me the depth that I need so that those other bushings on the bottom of the tail post and the rudder post can line up. Well, the problem that I run into is those bushings on the tail post are too close together, so I'm going to have to do a little adjustment on those. Where that vertical fin goes down in the tail post, we've got it set up at the right depth now, and I took a Sharpie and marked it around where it meets right there at the tail post where the vertical fin fits in there. And then I took a piece of masking tape and run around there for a good positive mark, and then the tail post won't slide in any farther than that. So I got that rudder lined up on there, and this bushing, I've just filed down this lower bushing here so that the rudder fit on there, and it fit in there good once I got it filed down a little bit. It's still tight. There's not a whole lot of gap in there, but it slides in there real nice. Now I had to file down about 1/16 of an inch or so to get it to fit. Now I'm going to put the bronze bushings in there rather than beat them in like I've seen on some pictures. I'm going to go ahead and press them in. I used a 1/4 inch bolt here and a nut, and I just put some washers on there, and we'll go ahead and just draw it in. Alright, probably up against the shank of that. It's better to do this with a nut or a bolt that's threaded full length of it, but and you don't have to worry about putting more washers on there. You can just pull it all the way through. Washers will bottom out right at the top of that bushing, so you can't overdrive it. It gets it all the way down in there. There it is. So that bushing's in. Now I'll put the other one in, and I'll put it in from the bottom because I want the bushing flush with this top here, and of course you can't get the nut in or the bolt in from the top anyway. I got the rudder mounted up and the pins in the bushings. So that locates this vertical fin back here in the tail post where we want it. I'd marked it previously with a magic marker, and I put some tape around it, but neither one of those are real hardcore marks. But what I did do, I went and got a little hose clamp, and it takes a small one, and I put that around it, and I clamped it on there, and that gives me a positive stop. So now there's no way that can go in any farther, and I know exactly how far to go. I already had tape around there to protect it from the paint and stuff from getting marred up. So now I can take my rudder off of there, pull the vertical fin out, and put it in both the rudder post here, the tail post here, and the bushing up in the forward part by the jack screw where it goes. Took a piece of welding rod and bent a hook in the end of it, and then took a little piece of paper towel, shop towel, and soaked it in lacquer thinner, run it up and down that tail post to clean it out on the airframe, and the same thing with the vertical fin, and cleaned those out. So then once I got that cleaned out, I took a piece of shop towel and soaked it in thinned peralkatone. There's a peralkatone, and I thin it down with paint thinner. You can thin it down as thin as you want, but anyway, I soaked this piece of shop towel in that and run that down the tail post. The vertical fin, I couldn't do that with it because it's capped on the top with a rib, and so you don't have access to both sides. I didn't want to risk getting a piece of paper stuck in there, so I'm just taking this peralkatone thin down and just smearing it in there and letting it run down in the tubes, both the front and the back. That's a vertical fin sitting upside down, and I just take. It'd be nice to be able to get down in there and make sure that gets coated all the way. It just kind of depends on it running down through there. And it is coming out the bottom on that rib, so it's going to take some cleanup when I'm done. I have to get some paint thinner on a rag and wipe it all down and clean it up. But now this vertical leg here on this front post, you can get down it and make sure it's all coated real good. With this diagonal leg here, just kind of have to depend on gravity for it. I have to change the angle of it. It is running down through and coming out down in that rib, that top rib. I've got the overrun of the peralkatone on the tail post of the airplane, the tail of the airplane fuselage cleaned up. And I've got to clean it up on the vertical fin. I get all this stuff cleaned off of there, and then we'll put it on the airplane. You can see it made a pretty good mess, but if you're going to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs. But it looks like I got Peralcatone pretty well down through those tubes and stuff, which is what I was wanting. That should help keep it from rusting so quickly.